Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're looking at the absolutely remarkable life of Charlotte Diggs Moon. You probably know her as Lottie Moon. We're talking about a woman whose unshakable dedication literally changed the entire landscape of international missions. This isn't just dry history, guys. It's a deeply moving look at what actually happens when rock-solid conviction meets totally selfless action.
Seriously, how did one single woman inspire billions of dollars in global giving? That's the big question, and it's our starting point today, as we unpack how an American Southern Baptist missionary from the late 19th century left such a massive footprint on the world. It's an incredible story of resilience, but to really grasp the sheer scale of her legacy, we've got to go back to where it all started.
So, Section 1, Early Life and Calling. You know, her origins actually make her later choices pretty shocking. Born in 1840 over in Albemarle County, Lottie grew up completely surrounded by wealth and privilege. She was incredibly sharp, getting a top-tier education in literature, languages, and philosophy, at a time when, frankly, very few women even went to college. She was fiercely independent and actually not all that religious in her younger years. But she ended up trading all of that comfort for an incredibly harsh reality, living simply in China, facing severe financial hardship, and completely embedding herself in remote, impoverished villages.
Now, this wasn't just some overnight, spur-of-the-moment decision. Following a really deep personal conversion, she went all in on her faith. Hearing these intense reports from overseas, she felt this undeniable calling. So in 1873, she was officially appointed by the Foreign Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention to go join her older sister Edmonia, who was already out there serving in China. She lived through a massive chunk of history, spanning from before the American Civil War all the way to her death in the early 20th century.
Moving on to Section 2, Immersed in Chinese Culture. Because just showing up in a new country, that's not enough. Once she hit the ground in China, Lottie figured out pretty quickly that to truly reach people, she had to dive headfirst into their world. She wasn't about to stay isolated in some cushy missionary compound. Sure, she started out teaching in girls' schools, which was super important, but she wanted to connect directly with the local communities. So she took a really radical step for her time. She became fluent in the Chinese language, adopted their local customs, and even wore traditional dress. She traveled all throughout these rural villages, sitting in homes and building genuine, real friendships with Chinese women. She firmly believed missionaries needed to live simply and identify with the people they served. And by doing that, she didn't just preach to them, she completely earned their trust. Section 3, Championing Women's Ministry. Now, as she was doing all this grassroots work, she noticed a massive gap in how missions were operating. Beyond her day-to-day work, she stepped up as this incredibly progressive voice, advocating for the role of women in the field. Lottie passionately argued that women brought something unique to the table. See, in traditional Chinese culture back then, male missionaries basically had zero access to women and children. It just wasn't culturally appropriate. But Lottie realized single female missionaries could totally bridge that gap. And she didn't keep this revelation to herself. She used her killer letter-writing skills to blast out messages to Baptist churches back in America, basically rallying Christians to step up, volunteer, and most importantly, fund these specific efforts.
And wow, she was not afraid to be blunt with the folks back home. She famously wrote, "How many there are who imagine that because Jesus paid it all, they need pay nothing." I mean, talk about a mic drop. She was directly calling out the complacency of people sitting comfortably in America, challenging them to see that real faith required tangible, sacrificial action. Her letters weren't just updates, they were these passionate, urgent pleas for resources to support the grueling work happening on the front lines.
Which brings us to Section 4, Rebellion, Famine, and Sacrifice. Because that frontline work, it was about to get harder than anyone could have predicted. Her commitment was tested in ways that are frankly hard to wrap your head around, as China plunged into extreme turmoil. Just look at the sheer volume of hardships here. She faced a daily barrage of intense political unrest, massive cultural barriers, profound loneliness from being thousands of miles from home, rampant disease, severe financial strain, and intense opposition. Yet, despite this literally crushing weight day in and day out, she never wavered. She was convinced that love had to look like practical compassion, not just nice words. The absolute climax of all this danger hit during the Boxer Rebellion around 1900. If you don't know, this was a terrifying period of extreme anti-foreign and anti-Christian violence. Missionaries and local Chinese Christians were facing horrific persecution. Most people would have been on the very first ship out of there. But not Lottie. No way. She flat out refused to abandon the people she had grown to love. The chaos didn't break her. Amazingly,
It only strengthened her resolve to stay faithful to her community.
Even after decades of this grueling, exhausting work, her focus was still 100% outward. She felt the heavy burden of millions of people, and her only real regret seemed to be her own physical limits. She wrote that the needs of these millions in China were so great that she simply could not do enough for them. And guys, she truly gave every last thing she had. In her final years, a massive, devastating famine swept through the region she served. Living out her belief in practical compassion, she just couldn't stand by and watch her neighbors starve. So she sacrificed her own food. She gave away her meals and her personal money to keep these families alive. It was incredibly selfless, but it completely destroyed her health. She became dangerously malnourished. Her friends finally convinced her to get on a boat back to America for medical care, but it was just too late. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1912, while traveling aboard a ship in Kobe Harbor, Japan, Lottie Moon passed away at the age of 72.
Section 5. A lasting global legacy.
Now, her body was returned and buried in Richmond, Virginia. But that tragic death was absolutely not the end of her story. Really, it was the spark for an enduring, massive, global impact. Just think about this for a second. She spent almost 40 years in China. 4 decades. She rarely ever came back to the States. She dedicated practically her entire adult life to sharing her faith, building bridges, and promoting education in a world completely, totally foreign to the one she was born into. She didn't just leave behind fond memories. She built a rock-solid foundation that would completely outlive her. She shared the gospel all across northern China. She championed education for marginalized Chinese women. She inspired literally thousands of new missionaries through her letters. And maybe most importantly, she built a deep-rooted culture of sacrificial giving among the congregations back home. She essentially taught them how to care for the rest of the world. And the results are staggering. Today, the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, which was created in her honor, has raised billions, yes, billions with a B, of dollars. This annual offering is still going strong, supporting international missionaries all over the globe today. That financial support she literally begged for in her letters, it turned into a tidal wave of generosity that has lasted over a century, funding global education, relief, and ministry on a scale that's just unprecedented. So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. We've just seen the historical weight of this one woman's life and how immense, single-minded dedication can echo through generations. Lottie Moon gave up her wealth, her comfort, and ultimately her very life. And in return, she sparked a movement that literally changed the globe. It really begs the question for all of us viewing this explainer today: how are we using our resources, our voices, and our time? What kind of legacy are our daily choices building for the generations that are going to follow us? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable life with me today. Keep learning, keep asking the big questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.